Lemony. Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com. The world is frozen outside. There's not a lot of gardening to be done. It's a little too early to be starting transplants, but I do cooking videos once in a while, and I thought I'd do a video on how to make, I think one of my daughter's favorite cakes, a lemon cake. It's a really simple cake. We're going to make it from scratch, very easy to do. All I need is a lemon or some lemon juice and a handful of other ingredients. Let's get into it. I'm also going to show you how to make the icing, a nice lemony, really lemony icing. Okay, so ingredients are wet ingredients. There's 1.5 cup of sugar, half a cup of oil, a cup of water, and the juice of a lemon, and 2 eggs. Our dry ingredients are 2¼ cups flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, ½ teaspoon of salt. Okay, so let's get going here. I'll show you this all goes together. Just realized I needed a 1/4 cup measure. All right, let's start with our wet, okay? I know sugar is a dry ingredient, but I mix it in when I'm doing my wet ingredients. That's just my one of my things. So we need 1½ cups of sugar. I'm just using a ½ cup measure here. I'll put that in. Getting it close to level. All right, and we need ½ cup of oil, which I have right here. It's a really easy cake to make. I don't know why people buy cake mixes. And we need a cup of water as well. You know, I don't use milk in this because the milk will curdle. I'm sure there's some way to do it. I just don't bother. And we need 2 sort of normal sized eggs. You don't want, like, I get these eggs from a guy down the road. You can see some of them are huge. So just like 2 normal sized eggs. All right, so we got 1. I know if you go to cooking school, you're supposed to crack your eggs separately in a separate bowl to make sure the shells, and you know, that's what you should do. So don't do what I just did. Okay, so we got the eggs there. So that's it. We got our water, oil, eggs, and sugar. And you get a whisk and just get that all mixed up together. All right, so I'm just combining everything until it's relatively uniform, making it nice and sunny. We still haven't added the lemon, right? This is not a lemon, even though it looks like lemon, looks very lemony, but this is not a lemon cake. Okay, that's good enough. You can use an electric mixer for this, okay? And I normally do. Just on camera, it's noisy and I can't talk over it. Also, I just want to show people that don't have any of that gear. You know, I spent years as a person with not much. And for that matter, if you don't have a whisk, you can use a fork to do this. You can totally do this with a fork. You know, whisk does a better job, but you can do it with a fork. Okay, let's see it's all ready. Now we need the juice of 1 lemon. Now, the trick with this recipe with the lemon is that you need 1 good sized lemon. This is a small lemon. It's the size of a lime, so it's not enough. But usually 1 lemon is fine for doing this entire recipe because you use some of the lemon for the icing and some of the lemon for the cake. All right. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to zest the lemon. I've already washed this. Wash your lemon before you do this. Right? It's easier to zest the lemon before you cut it up and squeeze it, right? Because it's got structure, right? So we're just taking the outer skin of the lemon, the zest. We're going to use this in the icing. I used to put this in the cake. This is a recipe I figured out myself. I used to put the zest in the cake, but actually I find it's just better in the icing. You get this really strong, because the icing's sweet, right? It's basically sugar and starch, but mostly sugar. Icing's pure sugar, really. A little bit of fat and a little bit of starch, but mostly sugar. So by adding the zest to the icing, it creates this fantastic contrast, right? Because the zest is so tart. And also, you know, when you bite into a piece of cake, if you're anything like me, there's a little bit of icing in every bite. I always try to cut my slice of cake up so that there's a little bit of icing in every darn bite. And so every bite you get that sweetness of the icing, the lemony flavor, and the strong intensity of the zest. All right, so that's that's for icing. Okay, we'll set that aside. Now I got the old-fashioned squeezer here. Just got to cut this in half. This is enough. This lemon here, which is quite small, is going to give me enough for the cake. For the icing, so normally what you do is you squeeze an entire lemon, a normal size of normal lemon, and you set aside 2 tablespoons of the lemon juice for the icing. Just scoop them out with a tablespoon. But today, I got this tiny wimpy lemon, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use the whole thing, and I'll just use this sort of emergency lemon juice that you can buy at the store. It's always good to have one of these kicking around. You never know when you're going to need a little bit of lemon for a salad dressing or something like that, right? Always good to have a little bit of that. They have big bottles of it you can buy, but I find they go off unless you're doing a lot of baking and you're using them all the time or a lot of cooking. But I don't do, I mean, like, you know, I've got lots of videos on cake and cookies and that sort of stuff. You know, I got kids and life's just nice when there's, you know, a dessert. But, you know, it's not like we live off of this stuff, right? We like to have a pretty healthy diet otherwise. All right, so now with a fork, you just fish out your seeds. I don't worry about the pulp. You could run it through a strainer. You know, if you want to be, if you're working in a fine French restaurant or something like that, or you know, how it looks really mattered. But I consider that pulp flavor, so I want that in my cake. So that's going to go in with the wet. Just give that a quick stir once, you know. So I just always think like I sort of count to 10 when I do it. That way I sort of know, do I need 1 10, 2 10s, 3 10s, that sort of thing. Anyway, I think that's fine. It's about 10 10s. Okay, now we're going to get our dry ingredients together. Just going to pre-combine them in one container and then add them to the wet. All right, so the dry ingredients are 2 1/4 cups of flour. And with measuring the flour, you do want to be pretty precise, right? Because that's going to affect your moisture level. So I don't normally do this, but I did, you know, do that with a knife, like they show you in home economics in school, if you took that. All right, so you need 2 1/4 cups of flour for your dry. All right. We need a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We need a teaspoon of baking soda. Okay, try to get that as precise as you can. And we need 2 teaspoons of baking powder. We got baking soda because we got the acidity of the lemon. Oh, we got baking powder because we want that lift. 2 teaspoons of baking powder. All right, so that's our dry. That's all you gotta do for that. Okay, so now I'm just gonna take my whisk. Oh, you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to preheat the oven. Darn it, I always forget to preheat the oven. So you wanna preheat the oven to 350 degrees. Okay, so I'm gonna turn it on right now. Okay, now I'm gonna combine this dry, just using the whisk, right? Just stir it around with the whisk, and it gets the baking soda and the baking powder nicely combined in there. You can also just use a fork for that, right? You just want to stir it all around for, you know, I don't know, maybe a 10 count. Okay. Now I'm not going to add the dry to the wet right yet. When you add the dry to the wet, a chemical reaction starts, and air bubbles start forming in the batter, and you want a nice light cake, so you don't want to waste any of that. So to me, you should not combine the wet and the dry until your oven's preheated. All right, so I got a few other things to do while I wait for the oven to preheat, so I'll do those while I'm waiting, okay? So we got to get a pan together, right? I like using this one. This pan is at the top 4.5 by 13. It's long and narrow. I really like the way this makes cakes. And it's easy to ice because I just ice the top. So you got some icing, but you're not going crazy with the icing. I just like this pan, right? This pan takes about 47 minutes to bake. This is like a loaf pan. This one takes more like 55 minutes to bake. And if I use this 9 by 9 pan, it bakes in about somewhere between 35 and 40 minutes. And if I use a 9 by 12 pan, it bakes in 35 minutes reliably. So it all depends on what kind of cake you want. And I mean, I like all of these. Sometimes if you're having company, I'll just pour it into the 9 by 12 pan because it makes a lot of slices of cake. And everybody's happy because everyone gets like a high cake to icing ratio sort of thing, right? But just for like my family, we just make this sort of simple. You ever go into the grocery store and you buy a pound cake? This has the dimensions of those store-bought pound cakes you can buy, which I love. So yeah, I like using this one here. Okay, so my trick for preparing the pan, you should have this all done before you mix your cake up, right? Is I just grease it with some butter. You could use vegetable oil, you can use whatever, right? Whatever you got, right? So you just grease it. When I was growing up, my mom would use the wrapper from the butter would come in this wax paper wrapper, and she would use that, rub the pan with that. We'd always have a bunch of them in the old butter stick wrappers in the fridge, and we'd use those to grease pans. But now, we're all sophisticated. I use this, this is a barbecue baster. I like using it for this. Okay, now what I've done here, this is enough to ensure that the cake comes out. But if you add wax paper to this equation, it is a little more reliable. So to do that, all you got to do is get a piece of wax paper, right? Just lay it out on the counter and just mark it a little bit where you're going to make your cuts. Doesn't have to be precise. Okay. Now I know roughly where I gotta go with this thing from here to here. Whoops. It's torn a bit, doesn't matter. This does not have to, for that matter, you can just put the pan upside down and hold it, right? And just use it as a guide. Okay, maybe clean it up a little bit before you put it in the pan. That's good enough. Clean up the cut, I mean. So I just put this, you can line the entire pan with the wax paper, but just lining the bottom is the most important thing. That really helps the cake come out. Then I just put a bit, I don't know if this is necessary, but I always do it. I grease the wax paper on the other side as well. This seems to just really help the thing come out. Okay, so this cake will come out no problem now. All right, so we got that all done. The oven's at 225, so I'm just gonna wait a minute before I continue with the video so that the oven is preheated when I mix my wet and dry. We'll see you in a couple seconds. All right, the oven's almost there, so I think I can continue with this process. So we got our dry, we got our wet, everything's all ready. Pan's greased, and the oven is seconds from being preheated. So we're good, so now we're just mixing this. Now, there's lots of, the ideal thing is to use a mixer, use a mixing machine, that sort of thing. If you don't got that, use a whisk. If you haven't got a whisk, use a fork. There, the oven's ready. There's a certain amount of mixing that's good for a cake, and there's a certain amount of mixing that's too much, right? Because you're beating air into it, but also there's a chemical reaction going on here, and you don't want to lose. You can tell this, I don't know if you can hear this, but it's bubbling, right? Because we've got baking soda and we got vinegar, so we got a chemical reaction. But we do want everything properly mixed. So for me, with this whisk, I think about a minute is what you need to do. Okay, so I'm just going to speed this up But I'm just going to count in my head, like a meditation. I'm going to count to 60 while I whisk this. All right, that's 60. All right, I'll set this whisk aside so I can lick it later on. Never stop being a kid. All right, now I'll just pour this into the cake pan carefully. We got lots of bubbles, we got lots of air, right? And this cake is going to rise. Give me a lovely, look at the color. And this batter, I'm not going to eat it right now, but it's good. Batter tastes good. Never eat raw batter, but everybody does it. Anyway, it's a good batter, but tastes even better when it comes out of the oven, when it's fully baked. Don't waste a drop. Get it all in there, right? All right, for this cake, you want the oven middle rack. Put it right in the middle there. Okay, I'm going to check it after 45 minutes. This usually takes 47 minutes, but you never know from day to day. So I'm going to check it after 45 minutes to see if it's done. Now let's make the icing. All right, icing. I don't know why people don't make their own icing. It's one of the great mysteries of our age. To me, there's nothing worse than store-bought icing. So this is dead easy to do here. So you get your lemon juice, and you want it's a very lemony icing. It doesn't matter because icing is basically pure sugar. So you can carry it, it's fine. So 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. Okay, we want about 2 tablespoons of butter. This is a basic butter icing recipe, although most butter icings have more butter than mine. I like them kind of stiff. I don't like them overly creamy. And I really never heard any complaints. So, I mean, you adjust it however you like. You can add more butter, less butter, whatever. This is actually vegan margarine, but butter works great. You know, in many ways, butter is better. Butter is always better. All right, but this is what I'm using. All right, so we got our butter, we got our lemon, and our zest. That zest in there, which is the real, you know, lemon. Now it's really lemony, right? I actually like to do this with a fork. So with a fork, just try to combine that. I mean, you can only do so much with it, right? It's pretty liquid, but just get it going there, right? All right. Get that started anyway. Now we're going to add, I'm going to put that somewhere. There we go. I'm going to add a cup of icing sugar and just see how that works. All right, so this is a half cup measure, so I'm going to add 2 of these. Just easier to get it in and out of the icing sugar bag. This doesn't have to be precise. We're going by feel here. Okay. That's a cup of icing sugar. That should do it. But if it doesn't, if this is too dry, we can add a little more water. We can add a little more butter, right? We can add more lemon juice. I wouldn't. I think for this, I think this is the right amount. It's a very lemony, very intense icing, but in my opinion, very good. Okay, so this is, we're not going crazy with the icing on this cake. A lot of cakes you want to have 2 cups of icing sugar or 1.5 cups of icing sugar, depending on the size of the cake. But this one here, I mean, this is fine, right? So I would say this icing is a bit wet from the looks of it. It's not, I can make a peak, but the peak's falling. It's still, I don't know, this is close, but I want it a little drier than this. So I'm going to add, do I have one of these anywhere? So I'm going to add 2 more kind of like 2 heaping tablespoons of icing sugar to this. I could have gotten away with what I had, but to me it seemed a little wet. There's a feel I want here, a sort of stiffness. I mean, it should still be spreadable. It's got to be spreadable, but to me, icing sugar, you want it as stiff as you can get it while still spreadable. To me, gives the right sweetness, the right texture, the right feel. We're getting close here. This could stand a little more. I'm going to put one more heaping tablespoon in, and I think that's probably good. Remember, this will stiffen over time too. It dehydrates the starch. That's, icing sugar is just, really, really refined sugar with starch. Okay, this feels right now. This is like, see how the fork, I can make a little mountain of it, stick the fork in and the fork stays up, right? To me, that's, if the fork falls down, it's not thick enough. So that's my preference anyway. It's still spreadable. You can see how I'm moving it around. It's spreadable. So I can spread it onto a cake without tearing the surface of the cake apart, right? So I think for me, this is the right texture. I mean, we just put the cake in the oven. This icing, we're not going to be icing the cake for a couple hours, right? I like to leave it for an hour on the counter. Then I put it outside or in the fridge to rapidly cool it down. I'm always nervous about putting it outside because I'm afraid birds or squirrels or some other thing will get at it, because we live in a forest basically. But I think that's good. That's not too bad. And you can see, make a little thing. The fork stays up, right? The icing's ready. And let's taste it. Woo! Oh, that's lemony. That's like lemon candy. You ever get those lemon candies you suck on? That's what it's like. It's intense, but to me, perfect. I mean, everybody's got their own limits when it comes to tartness. If this is too tart for you, use 1 tablespoon of lemon juice and 1 tablespoon of water, or use half the zest or whatever. But for me, a lot of the lemon, I mean, we put lemon juice in the cake. A lot of the lemoniness of the cake is actually in the icing. You can do a glaze, you can do, when the cake comes out, if you don't want to do icing or anything, you can just sprinkle sugar on the top, or just have it the way it is. You can do all of that. But for me, I mean, if you're going to have cake, don't mess around. Ice it. Don't waste my time, right? We're going to do something unhealthy. Let's do it right. Okay, so if we're going to have whiskey, let's have cigars too, right? Okay, so we'll see you when the cake comes out of the oven. The icing's all ready. I'm going to put this in a little container because I don't want it to dry out too much, just sitting out like this. And we'll just wait for the cake to bake. We'll see you in a little bit. See you in about 35 minutes or so. All right, so it's been about 45 minutes, actually more like 46 or 47 because I had some camera problems here. So let's get this cake out of the oven and have a look at it. Trying to do too many things at once. All right, so it's risen really well. From the look of it, I don't think it's done yet. No, it's not done. See how it's sticking to that, okay? So this needs another couple minutes. So we'll stick her back in. I'm gonna give that 3 more minutes and see where it is then, all right? Okay, it's been 3 minutes. Let's have a look, see what's going on. That seems a little bit better just by the feel of it. It's kind of, when you know it's not done, it's extra jiggly. I'll stick that right in the center. Put it here. I'm going to give that 1 more minute. I'm not going to bother. This is almost done. I think it needs 1 more minute. So I'm going to give it 1 more minute. The skewer came out, but just a tiny, so it wasn't liquid in there, but a little bit stuck to it. So I think it just needs 1 more minute, okay? And then I'm going to assume it's done. You really can't beat the skewer test. Alexa, 1 minute timer, please.
1 minute, starting now.
You really can't beat the skewer test. That's the right way to do it. Don't use just time. Always test things to find out if they're done when it comes to cake anyway. So the first time we pulled this thing out, there was batter. Not kind of like, not super wet, but damp batter on this skewer. You can use a metal skewer for this. Sometimes I use shish kebab steel skewers. Anything will work really. Anyway, the first time it came out, it looked like it was, batter was still a bit wet. This time, batter's done, but it's still a bit soft. I assume it's done now. I know I said it would take 47 minutes, but from day to day, you never know how much humidity is in the flour, and the size of the egg too. If the egg's big or small, or just little errors you make in the mixing, or the size of the lemon, right? There's all these different variables that add moisture, subtract moisture from the mix. You just never know exactly how long it's going to take. That's why you test and just keep putting it in for an extra I do it 3 minutes at a time until it seems almost done. Then add 1 more minute like I just did there. So as soon as it's done, Alexa, stop timer. They drive me nuts. Okay, so that came out clean. Now I'm gonna let this sit for 2 hours until it's like just slightly warm. I'm gonna let it sit for an hour on the counter like this, and then I'm gonna put it in the refrigerator to get it really cool so I can ice it for this video. And I have a taste of it before anybody gets home. Anyway, we'll see you in a couple hours and ice this cake. All right, so I thought I had the camera on, but I did not. I've been icing the cake. Took it out of the pan. Actually had a little mishap getting it out of the pan. It's not, didn't come out perfectly because I sort of forced it. So it's almost a good thing it wasn't on camera. Anyway, we still got a nice cake, right? So you slice off a piece and we'll give it a try. I got my daughter here so she can confirm or deny the awesomeness of the cake. All right, so that's what we're working with there. Beautiful, nice. It's nice and moist. You can see it's perfectly moist. Okay. Half for you, half for me. You want that one?
Yeah.
You get some extra icing there.
Oh yeah.
I don't need it. All right, there you go. Let's give her a shot. Oh, you're not using the fork.
Oh, I didn't know you gave me a fork.
Just eating it like, just going for it. All right. I was supposed to zoom out. I was so interested in eating the cake. Anyway, so we got a beautiful, simple cake. I mean, you can make these things as fancy and as ornate as you want. This is sort of a weekday after work level sophistication cake here. But the main thing is you got all the elements. You got really good cake, a really nice icing. Everyone's going to enjoy this for dessert. So that's how I make a lemon cake. You get the nice, soft, good cake texture, but then that super zippy, lemony icing that really brings home the fact that you are eating a lemon cake. I hope you found this interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Check out my podcast at maritimegardening.com. Check out my weekly article at maritimegardening.substack.com. And until next time, get out there, get at it, have fun in your garden, have fun in your kitchen. Thanks for watching.